The morning air in the forest was cool and quiet, but excitement hung like a heavy fog over the small town. News of the cruise ship had spread like wildfire. People from nearby villages and towns were arriving, cameras in hand hoping to catch a glimpse of the impossible. Some came out of curiosity, others hoping for social media fame, and a few, like the journalist, had a deeper need to understand what was really happening. The journalist arrived early, slipping past the crowd that had already gathered near the forest's edge. Authorities had cordoned off the area with bright tape, warning people to stay back. But the journalist, familiar with navigating crowded events, found a small gap and moved quietly toward the enormous structure. The closer they got, the more surreal the sight became. The ship was gigantic. Its hull, usually designed to float gracefully on water, now rested on the forest floor as though it had grown there naturally. Vines clung to the sides, birds perched in strange nooks, and leaves brushed against its windows. Despite being surrounded by trees, the ship looked untouched, almost pristine. It gleamed under the morning sun, and every detail from the railings to the lifeboats was intact. It was as if it had been frozen in time. Authorities were busy inspecting the perimeter. Engineers and scientists had arrived, taking notes, measuring the soil beneath the ship and scanning its sides. They were puzzled, speaking in quiet tones that carried a mix of awe and disbelief. How could a ship that size end up in the forest without leaving a trace of destruction? Where had it come from? No one had answers. The journalist, however, wasn't interested in the crowd or the tape. They wanted to see inside. There had to be a clue. And so, finding a partially open service door on the side of the ship, they slipped inside, careful to avoid detection. The interior was astonishing. The sound of footsteps echoed in the long, polished corridors. The air smelled faintly of salt and varnish, like a ship had just returned from a long voyage. Lights flickered on as if sensing a visitor, casting soft glows on the walls. The cabins were elegant and fully furnished. Beds were neatly made, towels folded, and toiletries perfectly arranged. It looked ready for guests not abandoned for years. The journalist moved carefully down a hallway lined with doors, each labeled with cabin numbers. Curiosity pushed them to open one. Inside there was a small sitting area, a window with curtains and a view that was supposed to be the open sea. But instead, it looked out onto the dense forest. It was both beautiful and unsettling. How could a window designed for an ocean view now face trees and birds? In another corridor, the journalist discovered the dining area. Tables were perfectly arranged with chairs pushed in, plates stacked neatly and cutlery gleaming. Menus were still in place. It was as though someone had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. A faint sound of water from a nearby fountain or pool added to the eerie calm. Moving further, they found the ship's lounge. Comfortable chairs and sofas lined the walls. Soft music, barely audible, seemed to play from a hidden speaker. The journalist paused, realizing that the ship wasn't entirely dead. Something was maintaining it, keeping it operational despite being in the middle of the forest. It made no sense. The most astonishing discovery came when the journalist found the swimming pool. Normally, a pool in a cruise ship is a place for laughter and relaxation. Here it was quiet, still, and strangely inviting. The water shimmered, reflecting the ceiling lights. No leaves or debris had fallen into it, even though trees and birds surrounded the ship. It was perfect, untouched, and impossible. As they explored, the journalist began to notice oddities. A journal left on a table had recent entries. Someone had been here. Someone who wrote about the day-to-day life aboard the ship. Maps showed places that didn't exist on any modern charts. Strange symbols and diagrams filled pages, hinting at things the journalist didn't understand. The writing spoke of experiments, travel, and time, though not in a way that made immediate sense. Despite the wonder, a sense of unease grew. The ship should have been empty, yet everything felt alive. Objects seemed to move subtly. A chair tilted slightly as the journalist passed. A door clicked softly behind them, though no one was there. Shadows seemed to stretch in unusual ways. Each step forward brought more questions than answers. Determined to find the truth, the journalist climbed several flights of stairs to the bridge. The captain's wheel and control panels gleamed under a layer of dust that had been carefully cleaned. Screens flickered to life as the journalist approached, showing maps and coordinates that defied logic. There were symbols, charts, and diagrams that seemed like a mixture of science and something else, something unexplained. It became clear that the ship's arrival in the forest was not an accident. Someone or something had deliberately brought it here. The journalist's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear. This was bigger than anyone could imagine. They weren't just documenting a mystery. They were stepping into one that challenged everything they knew about the world. Hours passed as the journalist explored every accessible area. They found a small kitchen with supplies untouched, a library filled with books on navigation, science, and strange phenomena, and a small theater that seemed ready to host an audience. Every room held details that made the ship feel alive, preserved, and waiting. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Authorities had tried to establish order, but curiosity and rumors made control nearly impossible. People speculated wildly. Some thought it was a secret government project, others swore it was supernatural, and a few insisted it was a hoax. Yet no one could deny the overwhelming presence of the ship. It commanded attention, respect, and fear. Back inside, the journalist found a staircase leading to a lower deck. The air grew cooler as they descended, and the corridors were narrower. Here the ship seemed more functional. Mechanical rooms hummed softly, and the faint smell of oil and metal filled the air. Pipes ran along the walls, valves turned slowly, and gauges blinked with numbers that no one could immediately interpret. In one room, the journalist discovered evidence that someone had been maintaining the ship recently. Tools were neatly arranged. Sheets of paper held logs and notes, and personal items, like a small pair of shoes and a jacket, were placed carefully on a hook. It became clear the ship was not abandoned. Someone had been here, hidden, perhaps observing the world outside, perhaps waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. A sudden noise made the journalist freeze. A soft, deliberate tapping echoed down the corridor. Heart racing, they followed the sound, thinking it might be another person or something else. At the end of the hallway, they found a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open revealed a small control room. Lights blinked, screens showed unknown data, and a small camera seemed to track movements automatically. The journalist realized they were being watched, not in the sense of a person seeing them, but by the ship itself or whoever controlled it. Every movement, every step seemed noticed, and yet no one appeared. It was as though the ship had a memory, awareness, and intelligence. Questions flooded their mind. How had this ship come to be here? Was it a remnant from a past disaster? A secret experiment? Or something beyond human understanding? The more they explored, the less sense it made. Each room added pieces to a puzzle that refused to fit together. Finally, after hours of wandering, the journalist sat in the lounge, overwhelmed. They wrote notes, sketched diagrams, and recorded observations. Every corner of the ship offered more mysteries, more strange hints of a story hidden deep within its walls. The feeling of wonder was accompanied by a growing unease. This was not just a ship. It was a place between reality and something else entirely. A monument to the impossible. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the forest, the journalist reluctantly left the ship, slipping back past the crowd outside. The ship loomed in the fading light, quiet and imposing. Every person who saw it felt the same mix of awe and fear. That night, the journalist couldn't sleep. Images of the ship, the strange symbols, and the perfect interiors haunted their mind. Something about the ship felt alive, watching, waiting, and deep down they knew that this was only the beginning. The story of the ship in the forest had begun, but its secrets were far from revealed. Someone or something was keeping them hidden, and the journalist was determined to find the truth no matter where it led. The next morning, the journalist returned to the forest, notebook in hand and a sense of determination settling in. They had spent the previous night thinking about the ship, the strange signs inside, and the feeling that it was not entirely empty. The questions kept coming, and with each one, the need to explore more grew stronger. Authorities had set up additional barriers, but the journalist managed to slip inside again before the crowd became too dense. This time they brought a small flashlight and a camera, wanting to capture evidence of what they saw. As they stepped aboard, the ship seemed familiar yet different. Sunlight streamed through the windows, reflecting off polished surfaces, but shadows lingered in corners, almost as if the ship itself was aware of their presence. They started in the lower decks, where the machinery and engineering sections were located. Pipes and valves ran in all directions, and a low hum filled the air. Some of the panels showed glowing numbers that seemed random, but others displayed strange sequences and symbols. The journalist took notes carefully, drawing sketches and writing observations. trying to make sense of what they were seeing. In one corridor, they noticed a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, they discovered a small room filled with charts, maps, and more journals. The journals were filled with handwriting that detailed strange experiments and observations about time and movement. Some pages spoke of events that had not yet happened. Others described places that did not exist on any known map. The journalist's heart raced as they realized that the ship might have traveled in ways no one could explain. The more they explored, the more it became clear that the ship was a mystery on multiple levels. It was perfectly preserved, with functioning lights, clean floors, and rooms that seemed ready for guests. Yet hidden within were hints of something impossible: time anomalies, cryptic symbols, and references to experiments that defied understanding. The journalist could feel the weight of history and the unknown pressing down, making each step heavier than the last. As they moved toward the bridge, a soft, clicking noise echoed down the corridor. The journalist froze. It was deliberate, steady, and came from deeper inside the ship. Following the sound carefully, they discovered a hidden passage behind a maintenance panel. Sliding it open revealed a narrow staircase leading down to a small, dimly lit room. Inside, the journalist found a desk with papers spread across it and a small chair pushed back. A single lamp flickered, casting shadows on the walls. On the desk was a journal open to a page written only days ago. The handwriting described the ship's disappearance from the ocean and its reappearance in the forest. It spoke of an experiment gone wrong, a journey through time and space, and the survivors who had remained hidden, unable or unwilling to leave. A sudden noise made the journalist jump. From the corner of the room, a figure emerged, a person calm but wary, wearing simple clothes and looking as if they had not seen a stranger in years. The journalist froze, unsure whether to speak or run. The figure spoke first. Their voice was quiet but firm. "I didn't expect anyone to come this far. Most people see the ship and leave or take pictures and gossip. Few ever explore its depths." The journalist explained who they were, showing their press credentials and assuring the person that they meant no harm. The figure relaxed slightly but remained cautious. They introduced themselves as someone who had lived on the ship since it vanished from the ocean, part of a small group that had discovered a way to survive in the unusual conditions created by the ship's strange journey. As the journalist listened, they learned more about the ship's secret. The vessel had indeed disappeared years ago, but not destroyed or lost. It had passed through a kind of anomaly, moving between times and places unpredictably. The small group on board had learned to adapt, finding ways to live and maintain the ship while remaining hidden from the outside world. They called it the shift, a movement that the ship made without explanation, sometimes taking it to distant forests, remote islands, or even back to the ocean. The journalist was stunned. Everything they had seen, the pristine interiors, the functioning systems, the journals, made sense in a strange way. The ship was not abandoned. It was alive in its own way, guided by forces beyond ordinary comprehension, and the survivors were its caretakers. Curiosity pushed the journalist to ask more. How did the shift work? Could the ship be controlled? The survivors shook their head. "We don't fully understand it. We can predict some patterns, but it is not ours to command. The ship chooses and we follow. It brings us to places that need discovery, or perhaps it tests us, keeps us aware of things beyond ordinary life." Together, they explored deeper sections of the ship that the journalist had not seen before. They discovered hidden rooms, storage areas filled with supplies, and even a small laboratory where experiments were conducted. Strange devices lined the tables. Some looked like navigational instruments, others like scientific equipment, and a few were completely unrecognizable. The survivor explained that these devices were part of attempts to understand the shift, to record its patterns, and perhaps one day, to communicate with it. The journalist noticed symbols carved into walls and floors. They seemed to follow no logical order, yet they were deliberate. The survivor explained that they were markers, reminders, and guides left by the first group of people who experienced the shift. Some were instructions, others warnings, and a few were personal messages, records of thoughts and feelings during long periods of isolation. Time passed differently inside the ship. Hours felt like minutes, and the journalist lost track of how long they had been exploring. Outside, the forest moved with the sun. Birds flew and people came and went, but inside, it was another world entirely. a place where past, present, and unknown converged. The survivors shared stories of their life aboard the ship, moments of wonder, fear, and profound discovery. They spoke of navigating the ship through impossible journeys, witnessing strange phenomena, and learning patience, humility, and caution. The journalist was captivated. Each story made the ship seem alive, almost sentient, responding to human curiosity and care. At one point, the survivor led the journalist to a small observation deck. From the window, they could see the forest stretching endlessly. The sun was beginning to set, and the light cast long shadows, making the ship appear even more surreal. The survivor explained that from this vantage point, they could sometimes sense the shift approaching. A subtle vibration, a change in air pressure, a quiet hum. It was a warning and an invitation, a reminder that the ship was never truly still. As evening fell, the journalist and the survivor returned to the lounge. They sat quietly, reflecting on what had been discovered. The ship was no longer just a mystery to be documented. It was a living puzzle, a challenge to human understanding. The survivor trusted the journalist enough to share details that had never been revealed outside the ship. The journalist took careful notes, sketching diagrams and writing down stories exactly as they were told. Every detail mattered. They knew that the world outside might not believe what they had learned, but documenting it honestly was their responsibility. The ship was not a hoax, not an illusion. It was real, and it carried within it experiences that defied normal understanding. Before leaving for the night, the journalist walked the corridors one last time. The ship seemed quieter now, almost protective. The glow from the lights reflected on polished floors, and shadows moved in rhythm with the hum of machinery. The sense of awareness, the feeling that the ship was observing, had not left. It was alive, waiting, and aware of its explorers. Outside, the forest was dark and still. The journalist returned to their small tent nearby, filled with thoughts and emotions too complex to sort. Excitement, fear, curiosity, and awe mixed together, creating a restless energy. They knew they had only scratched the surface. The ship's secrets were vast, and the true story of the shift was still hidden, waiting for the right moment or person to uncover it. That night, sleep was elusive. Dreams were filled with images of corridors stretching endlessly, lights flickering and symbols glowing on walls. The sensation of movement of the shift seemed to follow them even in sleep. They awoke at dawn with a renewed determination. The story was far from over. Returning to the ship, the journalist found it exactly where it had been, yet subtly changed. Something had shifted. A door slightly open that was previously closed, a faint smell of sea air, a new mark on the wall. It was a reminder that the ship was not static, that it was constantly alive and evolving. The journalist spent the day documenting, asking questions, and learning from the survivor. They explored hidden decks, examined instruments, and recorded stories. Each discovery brought more clarity but also deeper questions. How did the shift work? Was it a natural phenomenon or something created by humans or forces unknown? Could the ship eventually return to the ocean? Or was it destined to remain in forests, islands, and other improbable locations forever? By evening, the journalist realized that their understanding of the world had changed. This ship, seemingly impossible, had challenged every assumption they had about reality. The forest, the ship, and the hidden survivors created a story that was larger than any single person, a story that demanded patience, observation, and respect. The morning mist hung low over the forest, wrapping the massive ship in a soft gray cloak. Outside, the world seemed calm, almost ordinary, but inside, the atmosphere was tense. The journalist returned to the ship early, notebook and camera ready, knowing that the day ahead might reveal truths that could change everything. The survivor who had guided them through the ship the day before awaited quietly in the lounge. Their face was calm, but there was a hint of concern in their eyes. "We need to be careful today," the survivor said. "Some things are better understood before they are revealed." Their voice was quiet but carried a weight of authority. The journalist nodded, realizing that each discovery seemed to come with responsibility and risk. They began in the ship's corridors, retracing steps from previous explorations. The journal entries they had found before hinted at rooms that had not been visited, areas that held devices and mechanisms designed to monitor the shift and the strange phenomena surrounding the ship. These rooms were hidden, some behind false panels, others disguised as storage areas. Each discovery deepened the journalist's sense of awe. As they moved deeper, a low hum filled the air, stronger than usual. The lights flickered softly and shadows danced across the walls. The survivor paused, placing a hand on a railing. "The ship is aware of us," they whispered. "It knows we are exploring. Sometimes it responds." The journalist followed cautiously, their heart pounding. The corridors seemed longer, twisting in unusual ways, as if the ship itself were subtly rearranging its paths. Doors that had been closed before were now open, revealing stairways that seemed to descend further than expected. It was as though the ship was leading them somewhere. At the end of one hallway, they entered a large room that resembled a control center, but unlike the bridge they had seen earlier. Screens lined the walls, showing maps, charts, and streams of data that defied conventional understanding. A strange glow emanated from devices on a central table. The survivor explained that this was the heart of the ship's monitoring system, designed to track the ship and observe its surroundings in ways humans could barely comprehend. The journalist examined the devices carefully. Some resembled old navigational tools, while others looked like advanced computers or instruments from a science fiction story. Symbols flashed on screens, changing in patterns that seemed almost alive. The survivor explained that these patterns were attempts to communicate with the anomaly that moved the ship. "We don't fully understand it," they said, "but we observe, record, and try to adapt." Suddenly, a loud creaking noise echoed through the ship, followed by a strange vibration underfoot. The lights flickered violently and the air grew warmer. The journalist felt a mix of fear and excitement. The ship was shifting, responding to some force beyond explanation. The survivor gestured for them to stay calm. "This is the shift starting," they said. It happened sometimes without warning. The walls seemed to ripple subtly, and the floor beneath them vibrated with a steady pulse. Instruments on the table began to beep, displaying patterns that had never been seen before. The journalist could feel the energy in the air, a strange mix of power, intelligence, and mystery. It was as though the ship were alive, aware, and interacting with them. As the shift continued, a door at the far end of the room slowly opened, revealing a narrow corridor bathed in soft golden light. The survivor motioned toward it. "This is where the ship wants us to go," they said. The journalist followed, heart racing. Every step felt deliberate, as though the ship itself were guiding them. The corridor led to a chamber they had never seen before. It was small, circular, and lined with intricate symbols carved into the walls. In the center was a pedestal with a small glowing object. The survivor approached it cautiously. "This is part of the ship's memory," they explained. "It records events, decisions, and experiences. It is how the ship remembers everything it has encountered." The journalist leaned closer, mesmerized by the object. It pulsed with light, changing colors and patterns in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Touching it was tempting, but the survivor warned against it. "The ship chooses when to share its knowledge," they said. "We cannot force it." As they observed, the chamber seemed to come alive. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly and the air vibrated with a low hum. Images flickered in the glowing object, showing fragments of the ship's past. Scenes of the ocean, storms, distant lands, and moments of people on board. The journalist realized that they were witnessing memories, events that had occurred long ago and some that had not yet happened. Suddenly, a door at the far side of the chamber opened. Another figure entered, a young person, cautious but curious. The survivor introduced them quietly. "They are part of the group that has been living here," they said. "They arrived during one of the ship's earlier shifts and have chosen to stay hidden." The journalist felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Meeting someone else who had lived on the ship confirmed that the vessel was not abandoned. It also explained the subtle signs they had noticed before: recently used objects, the small traces of activity, and the journals with recent entries. These people had adapted to life aboard a moving anomaly, learning its rhythms and secrets. As the day progressed, the group explored together. The young person showed areas that the journalist had not yet seen: hidden cabins, small gardens where they grew food, and storage rooms with supplies collected over the years. Life aboard the ship was organized, practical, and surprisingly comfortable given the circumstances. The journalist was struck by the ingenuity and resilience of the people who had made this impossible vessel their home. Despite the calm, tension remained. Outside, authorities were attempting to board the ship, curious and impatient. Helicopters hovered and security personnel moved cautiously through the forest. The ship responded subtly. The floor shifted slightly, corridors seemed to lengthen, and doors closed automatically. The journalist realized that the ship itself protected its inhabitants, controlling access in ways humans could not predict. As evening fell, the journalist and the survivors returned to the lounge. They shared stories of life aboard the ship, moments of fear during violent shifts, and times of awe when the vessel revealed parts of the world that no one else could see. The journalist listened intently, taking careful notes, understanding that the true story was not just the ship itself, but the people who had chosen to live within it. Then, without warning, a sudden rumble shook the ship. The lights flickered and the walls seemed to vibrate. The survivors became tense, moving quickly to secure objects and check instruments. The journalist followed, adrenaline surging. This was a shift unlike any they had witnessed before. Corridors twisted and bent, creating paths that had never existed. Rooms appeared and disappeared as if the ship were rearranging itself in real time. The glowing object in the memory chamber pulsed violently, and symbols on the walls flashed in complex sequences. The journalist could feel the energy, powerful and overwhelming, coursing through every part of the ship. The survivors explained that this was a rare phenomenon, a full shift that could last for hours. The ship was moving through dimensions or perhaps times, and they were witnessing its power firsthand. It was dangerous but also magnificent, a reminder of the extraordinary forces at play. During the shift, the journalist noticed shadows moving independently of any person. Doors opened and closed on their own, and the sound of distant voices echoed through the corridors. The ship seemed to be communicating not with words but with movements, energy, and symbols. Every instinct told the journalist that they were part of something much larger than themselves, something that defied ordinary understanding. Hours passed, though time felt distorted. When the shift finally slowed, the ship returned to its quiet state. The lights stabilized, the corridors stopped shifting, and the glowing object in the memory chamber dimmed. The journalist and the survivors took a moment to catch their breath, reflecting on what they had just experienced. The survivor spoke quietly. "This is why we protect the ship and its secrets. The outside world cannot understand it yet. To reveal it without preparation could be dangerous, for them and for us." Their words carried a weight that the journalist could feel deep in their chest. The responsibility of knowing the ship's secrets was immense. As night fell, the journalist sat alone on the observation deck. The forest outside was quiet, the moon casting silver light on the trees. The ship hummed softly, a gentle reminder that it was alive, aware, and waiting. They realized that the mystery was far from solved. The shift, the hidden people, and the ship's memories were only pieces of a puzzle that stretched beyond comprehension. The day had brought confrontation, not with people, but with the ship itself. It had revealed power, secrets, and the delicate balance between revelation and danger. The journalist understood that this story could not be rushed. Every step, every discovery had to be treated with care. The ship was not just a vessel. It was a living, breathing entity, and those who lived on it were its guardians. Before leaving, the journalist wrote a detailed account of the day's events, capturing the energy, the fear, and the awe. The following morning, the forest was quiet, almost serene, yet the massive ship remained as imposing as ever. Its presence had become familiar to the journalist, but the sense of mystery had only deepened. Today, they knew, would bring answers, at least some, and perhaps more questions. The survivors had agreed to guide the journalist through parts of the ship that had remained hidden, areas reserved for those trusted. The journalist moved carefully through the corridors, notebook in hand, camera ready. Each step echoed in the polished halls. Despite all they had seen, the ship still felt alive. Doors creaked open slightly before anyone touched them. Lights dimmed or brightened subtly, and the soft hum of machinery carried an almost deliberate rhythm. It was a living thing, aware of its passengers and aware of the journalist. They started in the lower decks where storage and mechanical rooms were located. Here the ship's inner workings were revealed in full. Pipes twisted through walls, valves hissed occasionally, and small lights blinked across panels displaying data that defied conventional understanding. The survivor explained that this was where the ship maintained itself during the shift, its mysterious movements that no human could predict. "This is where the ship listens," the survivor said, "and where it decides." The journalist was struck by the precision. Everything was maintained meticulously, Yet the system seemed beyond complete human control. It had intelligence, patterns that could be followed but never fully explained. It was as though the ship itself had a mind, a will that was both protective and secretive. As they moved deeper, they came to a section filled with journals, artifacts, and personal belongings. Each item told a story. Photographs of past voyages, maps of oceans and forests, notes on experiments and observations all lined shelves and tables. The journalist realized that this was a record not just of the ship, but of life aboard it, of people who had chosen to exist outside normal boundaries, navigating an impossible vessel and surviving its mysteries. The survivor guided the journalist to a small hidden room they had never seen before. It was circular, with symbols etched into the walls that glowed faintly. In the center was a pedestal holding a crystal-like object pulsing softly with light. The survivor explained that this object was part of the ship's memory, a core that stored experiences, movements, and choices. It was the heart of the ship, connecting it to the shift, recording everything yet revealing only what the ship allowed. The journalist approached carefully. Touching the crystal sent a shiver up their spine. Images flickered within it, fragments of oceans, storms, distant lands, and moments of people living aboard. Some events had occurred long ago, others were yet to happen. The ship's memory was vast, intricate, and alive. It was not merely a vessel. It was a recorder of time and experience, and the people aboard were its caretakers. Suddenly, a subtle vibration ran through the floor. The lights dimmed slightly, then brightened. A low hum filled the air. The ship was responding. The survivor placed a hand on the pedestal. It senses visitors, they said. It shows you what it decides is safe to reveal. The journalist watched, mesmerized. The crystal projected a vision of the ship at sea, moving through waters that no one could identify, surrounded by storms and strange lights. Then the scene shifted to the forest, showing the ship's sudden appearance and the delicate balance it maintained to survive in such an impossible location. The realization hit the journalist fully. This was not just a ship stranded in a forest. It had traveled, defied the natural world, and existed in ways ordinary humans could barely comprehend. As the vision faded, the ship trembled gently. A door opened at the far end of the room, revealing a new corridor the journalist had never seen. The survivor nodded. It wants us to explore further. But we must be careful. Not everything outside this chamber is safe. The corridor led to a large observation deck, higher than any part of the ship the journalist had seen. Windows stretched around them, offering a panoramic view of the forest below. Sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating dust particles in the air, giving the room a golden glow. From here, the ship seemed to pulse with awareness. Every vibration, every hum, felt purposeful. From the deck, they could see activity below, small movements of wildlife, birds flying near the ship, and even shadows that seemed out of place. The survivor explained that the ship existed in a delicate balance. Its presence affected the surrounding forest, but it also needed the forest to maintain its stability during the shift. Removing the ship entirely could be catastrophic, both for the vessel and the world around it. The journalist felt the weight of responsibility. This story was not just about documenting the impossible. It was about understanding it, respecting it, and protecting it. The people aboard had adapted, learning the rhythms and secrets of the ship. They were part of something extraordinary, living within an anomaly that defied logic, science, and human understanding. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the ship, a soft, rhythmic tapping, almost like a heartbeat. The lights flickered again and the floor vibrated slightly. The survivor's expression grew tense. "A shift is coming," they said. "This one may be different." The ship trembled gently, then more forcefully. Corridors twisted subtly, doors opened and closed, and the air seemed charged. The journalist's heart raced. This was not like before. The shift was larger, more pronounced, more aware of their presence. They realized they were witnessing the ship in full motion, moving between realities, dimensions, or perhaps times. It was alive in ways that no human could fully explain. They returned to the memory chamber to observe the crystal again. This time the visions were more vivid. Oceans, islands, distant cities, and forests stretched before them. People walked the decks, some familiar, some unknown, all living aboard the ship through various shifts. The journalist realized that these were glimpses of lives, experiences, and stories that had been preserved within the vessel. The ship had witnessed everything, remembered everything, and was now allowing them a glimpse. Hours passed as the shift continued. Outside, the forest seemed still, almost as if nothing had changed, but inside, the ship moved in ways that defied perception. The journalist documented everything: lights, sounds, vibrations, visions, knowing that words alone might never fully capture the experience. As the shift slowed, the survivor explained the final secret. The ship sometimes chooses to reveal itself to the outside world. Its appearance in the forest was not random. It was deliberate, a signal, an invitation to witness its mystery. But it remained selective, protecting its caretakers and its memory. The journalist understood that the ship's story was not just about being discovered. It was about respect, trust, and understanding the unknown. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the deck. The ship hummed softly, as if sighing after the day's events. The journalist sat quietly, reflecting on everything they had seen. The ship was more than a vessel. It was alive, aware, and filled with stories that spanned time and space. The people aboard were not captives, but explorers, caretakers, and witnesses to the impossible. Before leaving, the journalist walked through the corridors one last time, touching the polished railings, observing the journals, and noting the small personal items left carefully by the survivors. Each object told a story of resilience, adaptation, and wonder. They realized that the ship's greatest secret was not its anomaly, but the people who had learned to live within it, to survive, and to thrive in a world that defied ordinary understanding. Returning outside, the journalist watched the forest swallow the ship in shadows and light. Helicopters hovered above, authorities moved cautiously, and tourists lingered at a safe distance, unaware of the deeper mysteries within. The ship seemed calm, almost serene, yet powerful, aware and alive. That night, the journalist wrote their final notes. They decided to publish the story with care, revealing the existence of the ship, its impossible presence in the forest, and the lives of the people aboard, but without exposing them to danger. They captured the wonder, mystery, and human resilience, knowing that some secrets were meant to remain partially hidden. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of corridors that stretched endlessly, glowing symbols and distant oceans. The journalist awoke with a sense of awe and humility, understanding that the world was far larger and stranger than they had imagined. The ship was a reminder that reality was not always what it seemed, that mysteries existed beyond human comprehension, and that some stories required patience, respect, and observation. In the following days, the journalist's story was published, attracting attention, speculation, and wonder. People debated whether it was real or a hoax, but the journalist knew the truth. The ship remained in the forest, occasionally disappearing or shifting, continuing its silent journeys, carrying within it memories, experiences, and secrets that spanned dimensions. The survivors continued their quiet lives aboard, aware of the outside world but choosing isolation to protect themselves and the ship. The journalist visited occasionally, documenting carefully, always respecting boundaries, and learning more about life aboard a vessel that defied the ordinary. The story ended not with all questions answered, but with a sense of awe, curiosity, and respect for the unknown.